All right, everyone. This was the amazing song request by the amazing Holly. Thought we would play some tunes and you know, get ourselves more livelier in this crazy, fatigue, tiring, divided times. And on that note, thank you for joining us for the midterm. I can definitely say the board and I are very, very, very excited to hear all your presentations tonight and see what's has been going on. Um, it has been an interesting week, a very tiring one, but the good thing is that we can leave, all that divide and all that crazy, and we're all here together to discuss something we love, the environment, sustainability, and how to, better that as a whole. So on that note, without further ado, I'll get into the instructions and the order, and then you guys can take it away. So I'm sure the DOPs have let you know all presentations are 10 minutes. There will be a 5-minute Q&A. After that, Hannah will be keeping the time, and you'll be seeing some hand gestures like 2 minutes, and the DOPs will let you know. For the questions, anybody that has questions, please put it in the chat box. The director of projects will be monitoring that, and they will ask 2 questions in a 5-minute Q&A. If there's more time, we will ask maybe 1 or 2 more, but we're trying to keep it concise so that we don't keep you guys here for like hours on hours, because these tend to go long. Besides that, I think that's all the instructions we have in terms of the order. Verimoto, we will start with you, as some of you guys are in a different time zone. And again, thank you guys for joining us. After that will be ECN, Hella, Gunas, ING, and then We Act. So without further ado, Verimoto, you guys can take it away.
Great, thanks. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes. Great. 1 second. Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Liz Wilson, and I'm the project manager for the Verimoto team. Before we get started with this midterm presentation, I'd just like to thank the team who have been amazing and put in so much hard work so far this semester. So today, I'll start off by giving you some background about Verimoto and describing what our project is. And then we'll go on to talk about the progress we've made so far and the main lessons we've learned, before finishing up with our next steps for the rest of the semester. So to give you a bit of background about Verimoto, Verimoto is a New York City-based carbon intelligence company that helps people to reduce their carbon footprint through energy analytics and clean energy plans and carbon offsets. So customers can sign up to Verimoto and they can get their utility bills checked to make sure they're accurate. They can determine their carbon footprint. They can sign up to clean energy plans, and they can purchase carbon offsets if they want to. And when you sign up, Verimoto uses the data straight from your utility to give you practically real-time information about your energy usage. And while they're New York City based, they're currently participating in a Techstars accelerator in Birmingham, Alabama, and applying a lot of what they've learned in New York City to the Birmingham area. So the project, currently Verimoto is serving like individual customers and individual households sign up, but they want to expand their offerings into new customers and partnerships. So right now they're targeting property management companies directly rather than just the tenants of the building. And they're also trying to integrate with other PropTech companies or use their data and services to provide value to PropTechs. And for those of you who don't know, PropTech stands for property technology, and it encompasses a whole range of online platforms and artificial intelligence programs which span the whole property and real estate industry. So it's a really broad term. So our team is helping Verimoto with the customer discovery phase of this expansion. We're researching the market and the needs of potential customers, and also helping them to start spread the word and craft some marketing materials to to spread information about how Verimodo might be beneficial to these customers. And we've approached this project by splitting into two teams. So half of us focus on the PropTech side and half of us focus on the property management side. We meet weekly, so everyone's on the same page, and we also meet weekly with Donna, the CEO of Verimodo as well. So the focus of the expansion into PropTech and property management is based on tools that Verimodo has already developed or is just finishing up developing now. So on the top left is an example of a dashboard that showing the data they collect. So for buildings that have signed up, you see the specific properties, and you can also view the aggregate data as well. This shows a snapshot of their work in Birmingham, Alabama. And we see these individual properties as well as the overall scores. And this sort of data could be really beneficial to database PropTechs, or could be integrated into other online dashboards that PropTechs use. On the bottom right, we see a snapshot of their new building assessment tool, which allows you to look up any address in New York City and view the compliance and the scores and potential fines under local laws 84, 33, and 97. So local laws 84 and 33 require certain buildings to measure and report on energy usage and energy efficiency measures. And local law 97 will come into effect in 2024 and will set carbon emissions caps on buildings above a certain size. And if you don't meet those caps, then you'll be fined. So this will be of particular interest to property management companies in New York City who might be facing potential fines in a few years if they can't find ways to reduce their energy usage. So far, our progress has really been in the research phase of the project. Both the PropTech and property management teams have completed the initial research and got sort of the lay of the land. And for the PropTech side has also done the more refined research stage and identified targets for Verimodo to pursue. And on the property management side, we're still working on the refined research and target identification phases of the research. We're collecting all the data in Airtables, which Verimodo staff is already using, and pulling our research as we do it to start putting this into practice and contacting these companies. Our key achievements so far are laid out here. So for property management, we've compiled a master list of property management companies in New York City. And then we've identified some filtering criteria to narrow it down to a manageable chunk that we can focus on, which includes mid-sized buildings in, mid-sized companies in a middling price range, focusing on companies with Columbia alumni on staff so that Verimodo has an easy way to contact them, and trying to filter by energy efficiency rating, which is reported under local law 33. And on the PropTech side, we've compiled a master list of PropTech companies. We've filtered that based on Columbia alumni, funding, and relevance to Verimodo's mission, and identified these potential synergies and partnerships to then develop in-depth profiles of our top 10 prospects for Verimodo to go after. So the whole team has learned a huge amount over the past few weeks. We've obviously learned a lot about PropTech and property management and the energy analytics space, but we wanted to share a few more transferable lessons that we've come to understand. So the first one is to ask the right questions. Obviously, there's limited time this semester, and it's a whole new industry that we're tackling that most of us on the team aren't very familiar with. So at the beginning, it was hard to know where to start and what we would even need to know. During some of the workshop sessions that SUMANI had set up, the consultants asked us questions that we'd never even thought of asking the client. And it made us realize how much we still needed to understand, and helped us to use our questions more effectively after that, and use our weekly client meetings really efficiently to make sure we were asking focused questions that were valuable and help move us forwards in the project. And we've also learned not to be afraid of just asking a bunch of questions, because we don't know anything about this at the beginning, and the only way we can learn is by having those conversations, and Donna has been great with that. The second thing that we've found really important is reducing the scope of the research to something manageable. For example, on the property management side, starting off with all the property management companies that operate in New York, or all the buildings in New York. It's too much. We can't do it in a semester. So we've had to be really efficient and strategic and narrow it down to where is the most valuable research for Virimodo and what can we achieve in the time we've got. And we've also learned to be really smart with the order in which we apply filters to these lists and think a few steps ahead and see where any potential shortcuts are to save us time and effort. The final thing is that sometimes the target moves and sometimes that's okay. So for example, our project scope talked about commercial properties, but when we started the project and started talking to Virimodo, they wanted to focus on residential more now because COVID-19 has affected how commercial properties are used in New York. And it's okay to change the target if, as you get more information, things change, right? It's hard to know what you're aiming for until you have some understanding of the market and of the field. And as well, because Virimodo is a startup, they're a young company exploring these new areas, then this fluidity was a little hard to navigate for us at first, but now we're really loving it. We're loving that we can influence the direction that they're going in and feel like we're providing real value to them. So the next steps for the PropTech team, the next steps are to begin developing some informational materials that can be sent out to companies. And in developing these materials, the team will be considering the problems that PropTechs are facing and how Virimodo might help them to address those problems. And this is going to be challenging because for every company on that list, there might be different answers to this. So they're going to be working really closely with Donna, the CEO, to narrow down to some common ground to focus on for these materials. For the property management team, the next steps are to continue working on figuring out the compliance with Local Law 97, which is the carbon emissions caps law. So we're working to identify which companies will need Virimodo's help with complying with Local Law 97 and avoiding those fines. And at the same time, we're testing Virimodo's new buildings assessment tool that I showed you, which shows the emission caps and some fine predictions. By the end of the project, we should have completed the research and the materials for both PropTech and property management, which will leave Virimodo well informed and ready to step into these new customer bases. So thank you for listening on a late Thursday evening in a crazy week. And I'm looking forward to sharing more of our progress over the next few weeks, and I hope you are too.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Let's go ahead and open the floor for questions. Did anyone have any? I didn't see anyone show up in the chat, but if anyone has a question, feel free to ask.
Yeah, I have a question. Great job, Liz. It seems like your team was really adaptive with those moving targets. It seems like your team, as well as ours, as well as sort of just constrained by, the amount of time that we have to work on the project. A lot of commitments that we're balancing as well. If you guys had a longer time span, how would you say that your project would change? Would the focus change, or would there be certain metrics that you would be able to add in from like additional research or meeting with maybe some people from the industry that you're not able to get as contacts now? How would you say the scope of the project would change?
That's a great question, Alyssa. I think the first change would just be the depth of our research. So especially the property management research and around Local Law 97, the covered buildings list. So the list of buildings that will have to comply with that law has not been released yet. It's like it's the Local Law 88 list plus a bunch of exceptions and other stuff. So we'd probably try to figure out what that list would look like. Whereas now we're just using the Local Law 88 list as a proxy because we don't have time to go into all the exceptions. And we're just taking for each company, we're just taking like 10 of their buildings, what's the energy score, give an average, give an idea of which companies have straight A's across the board and which ones are struggling. If we had more time, we'd do that a bit more thoroughly. But realistically, you know, if we're looking at, we've already narrowed it down to a list of 50 companies, but if each one of those 50 companies has, you know, how many buildings in New York City, we just don't have the time to look all those up in a database and get a really thorough score. So that's definitely the first change we would make if we had more time.
Are you, sorry, I have a follow-up. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I don't want to dominate the questionnaire.
Alyssa, go for it.
Okay. So you had mentioned, you know, you would expand like those, like you said, those 50 companies that you guys are looking at. Is that something that you guys are working into the recommendation for them to do or to outsource in the future?
I mean, they're aware that the market is much bigger than what we're giving them. It probably depends on what things look like for Virimoto once they're done with the textiles accelerator and they move back to New York. The New York property management industry is also really difficult. And Donna was saying, you know, if we get one contact in property management in New York, then that'll be a huge success because it's all who you know and getting it in, and it's very much like set that, you know, things have been the same way for years and people don't want to change and listen to these new tech companies. And so I think the idea is that the 50 that we're highlighting are your best bets for getting it in. And I assume if they exhaust all of those and nothing happens and they still think it's worth pursuing, then they would look beyond that to others, or they would maybe shift their focus, or, you know, maybe it's not worth pursuing in the way that they thought.
All right. Liz, thank you so much. That was an excellent presentation. And Alyssa, thank you for the question. That was very thoughtful and well structured. I thought it added a lot of value. Let's go ahead and move on to the next presentation. And Nicole, can you remind me who's next?
And it's Eastside Community Network, ECN.
Perfect. Thank you.
Just a reminder, guys, any questions, please put them in the chat so that the DOPs can look at them. Thank you.
All right. Can everybody hear me well?
Yes.
Thanks. All right. So, hi everyone. Today we're going to be presenting on our progress with Eastside Community Network. So our group is integrated by Aldo, Rubana, Sally, Jessica, Shay, Mahak, and myself. We'll give a background on ECN and their role in the community. Then we're going to move on to deliverables and how we defined our focus areas, followed by a brief expansion of those focus areas. And we're going to finish off with just the next steps. So ECN really tries to focus on 5 things. The first one being green growth, neighborhood stabilization, commercial revitalization, economic stability, and youth development. And through these focuses, they try to create resources for people. Oh, sorry, can you go back one? Yeah, they try to create resources for people, transform places, and develop plans that prioritize sustainable community revitalization. Thanks. So ECN is located in Detroit's east side, which is a low to moderate income area with a large BIPOC community. Major concerns in the area are aging stormwater infrastructure, concentration of industrial uses, vacant buildings, unmonitored demolitions, high clay content in soil composition, and lack of environmental awareness. On the right, you can see the impacts that ECN has had on the community. And ECN is actually incredibly amazing in the amount of projects it has. For example, it has youth development programs, adult education and professional development programs, green infrastructure programs, and so on. We are focusing on the Lower East Side Plan, East Side Action Plan, which is also known as LEAP, which encompasses most of ECN's focus areas. And you can especially see that in the strategies outlined below. The LEAP plan is actually in phase 3, which is focused mostly on strengthening Chandler Park neighborhood and transforming open spaces. With this, I'll leave it for Rubana.
Um, so, so Eastside Community Network gave us a quite a large scope of deliverables, and because they have their, their programs are targeted at so many different types of and different levels of problems that the Detroit East Side faces. Well, we had to narrow them down on our own. So we picked up 4 different topics that we would set as our project goals. And the first one would be to advance and strategize the capacity, how to increase the capacity of ECN's community to design, install, and maintain green and gray infrastructure. So they do have the skill set and the knowledge, but they are finding it hard to multiply and develop that into a larger scale and make it more economical and profitable for the people who are doing it. And then, the other thing we'll be working on would be to create a green labor pool. And again, with this, they already have a couple of different programs that they have started. So we are working on how we can develop and advance this. And then the other thing would be to leveraging public and private funding and to promote policy changes to support enhanced green infrastructure and to build a clean and sustainable ecosystem over there. So these are the 4 different focus areas that we are concentrating on. And we're going to go delve deep into each one of them right now.
Hey everyone. So for green infrastructure, this is a flood mitigation solution that ECN is embracing wholeheartedly. It's something that's able to mobilize the community engagement in direction towards addressing gray and green built infrastructure. Now, as we have briefly mentioned, there's a lot of vacant lands, a lot of unattended land that has somewhat eroded throughout the years, and now ECN is initiating this movement to really begin to care for these lands and transform them into usable resources for the community. So green infrastructure is something that we have narrowed down as our focus so that we can move forward towards implementing this within the resources that ECN has already established themselves with. So first, the very first step for us is to conduct precedent case studies. And when we first met with Donna, she was basically telling us that they would like to model their research and their initiatives around other initiatives that have been successfully implemented, such as in cities as Baltimore and Chicago that have mobilized the community to really bring forth these solutions to fruition. So right now, we're still in the process of performing a situational analysis. This is to assess policies, any sort of challenges that's facing the community, and any sort of bottlenecks that are somewhat creating a gap between project proposals and actual solution execution. And going forward from here, we're going to want to continue interacting with community engagement. We want to begin conducting interviews with other local organizations so that we can really gauge a more accurate understanding of the local scope of implementing these sort of solutions. And then from there, we'll go ahead and evaluate what sort of prospective strategies we can move forward with so that we can tie these solutions together.
Sally, do you want to take?
Sorry, could you go to the next slide?
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, it's that. So as Aljo mentioned before, the Limp area have the problem of the vacant lot and mismanaged alley that is not safe for children to play at. So the current strategy is to have ECN to educate the tenants about their right to prevent tax foreclosure and alley. And there's also a alley cleanup programs implemented by the city government, where the government pretty much hire people to clean up the alley and make space for resident to use. So we're proposing, and just collaborate with that program, we're also proposing land conversion. So those open spaces could be converted to community garden, recreation area, especially for children to play. And also due to the improper demolition house, there's high clay content in their soil. So there are some mitigation efforts in place, and also ECN also collaborate with the landscape architecture firm to design the LIMP area's green infrastructure. So for us, we're proposing low impact design and set up indicator to make our case. There's also resident complaint about the flooding in their basement, and to mitigate this problem, bioswale are used to absorb more water, and we're proposing to have further implication for this method and also look at case study for best management practice.
So solar energy, I'll be quick, I know we're short on time. We're really just looking into kind of what they've already told us about solar, which is just they've expressed interest. They are aware that there's opportunities for that. So really we're looking to expand on this for them and present some information on precedent case studies, assessing the challenges, affordable solutions, and what ways it can be a way to like promote community engagement. And really focusing on the areas of affordability, stimulating job creation, and sustainable infrastructure, focusing on specifically on one case study, which is on the right, O'Shea Solar Park in Detroit. It's about an hour away. It's one example of a sustainably built community solar farm that also incorporates some other, I think, green gardens along with it. So we're looking into that.
So for over a decade now, there's been predatory lending in the city of Detroit, which has really attributed to the blight that happens because there is no basically incentive or plan to keep residents in their homes. There really should be a rent-own program, but what happens is the owners or the real estate lease agencies typically don't pay their taxes, and there's a closure notice ends up on the door, and then whomever is living in the house gets kicked out. So this practice has been happening for, again, over 10 years. And then what happens, our homes go unused, they're vacant, and they get demolished. And you end up with a ton of vacant land. So anyway, we're looking into the policy that allow for this to happen, and precedents in other cities.
Hey, you guys, I'm so sorry. You have hit time, and we need to start our questions.
Okay. Yeah,
Two
sure.
questions on the chat box. I can read them out. So Aldo, you mentioned that you will be interviewing groups to develop your plan for green infrastructure. What kinds of groups have you shortlisted to interview?
Yeah, great question. So we will begin by interviewing partnerships that ECN has established in the past to conduct, to bring to fruition certain projects such as Rain Garden. There's multiple projects and local neighborhood clubs that they call, that they'll sort of rally up. They'll interact with them in the sense of establishing workshops to, as Jessica mentioned, that there's the tax predatory like housing strategy that has been going on for the past 10 years. So what ECN has established is a workshop for tax education, essentially. And those are the groups that we'll want to focus on interacting with, just to develop that bigger picture.
Okay, thank you. Jessica, you have been to the site. You did like a field trip. Can you tell us a little bit about that visit?
I spent a few hours driving around the whole site, which is really about a 2-mile block if you take the whole perimeter of all of the neighborhoods. And I also met with Angela, who is sort of the second in charge at ECN. So yeah, I mean, what's on the screen here now are a couple of the blighted, vacant lots and homes that probably are scheduled on the block to be demolished. What was it? Was there a question that you want me to address, or?
I just wanted to know a little bit more about the visit to the site. Was it productive for you guys? Did you learn something?
Not atypical. I mean, I think, I was able to get a better understanding of what the ECN does, their resources, what they offer to the community, and where some of their, what they're lacking in. I think they could really use some outreach. I think that, a lot of people in the community don't have effective ways to even, communicate with ECN. They may not have internet, they may not have heat, they may not have water. So, to expect that all the residents of this community is going to be able to communicate or understand what resources are available to them is sort of a high expectation. So I think that we are going to have to also focus on maybe some methods of getting out to the community for them, outreach, et cetera, basically mobilizing their community a bit more.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other questions, guys? No? Ravana, I have one quick question. I know we have 2 minutes, right, Hannah? Yeah, okay. Hannah, one quick question. I know you mentioned, so this was one of the projects that had like the biggest scope because it was encompassing so many things. So can you tell us just a little bit real quick, how has that process been with the client, trying to narrow it down a little bit and trying to really choose and recommend what you want to focus on and where you can be more effective? Have you found any resistance, or like how's that been?
So the client is a little bit delayed in their responses, and they aren't exactly invested in the project as much as we'd like, but our first talk with them was really very informative. And so how we move forward from that, I think, was also, we kind of looked at the range of scope that we had, and we sort of tried to group it into these 4 larger portions that seemed the most important to us. And we also kind of looked at what we as a group had as a skill set. And though we did not match exactly, we tried to do justice to that too. And it also really helped. We had our faculty meeting with Lynette, and it helped us a lot. And I think even moving forward, we will be structuring our focus areas even more in a more organized way. And yeah, and thinking about delivering stuff in about like 6 weeks, which just seems crazy. Yeah.
Okay, I understand. Okay, thank you so much. Wonderful job, guys. Thank you. Now we're gonna have our next group. She's Hala Cocktail. Yes.
Yep, Hala's up next.
Okay, give me 1 second. I thought Dina's was next, so I should. We can go. I'm ready if I thought we were next too. So
are you ready? Or
Olivia says.
Olivia, can you go?
Yeah.
Are you ready? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Are you guys able to see that? Okay, awesome. Hi, everyone. Thanks for spending the time to hear from all the presentations, and good job to everyone so far. So we are GUNOS, and our project is focused on, ooh, there we go. Well, first, before I get started, I just want to give you a quick agenda. So we're going to talk about who GUNOS is, some of the project deliverables, which encompass life cycle analysis and a marketing plan, and then we'll talk about our next steps from here. So GUNOS is a luxury handbag company based here in New York, and their focus is on vegan leather. And the founder, Sugand, actually kind of had an awakening about leather, working in you know, handbags in the past, and kind of seeing exotic animal skins and leather and the processing behind them, and decided that there was a market and a need to promote vegan leather. So the focus is on you know, leather substitutes across the handbag company. And as you guys can see, it has like a similar aesthetic to Kate Spade or Coach, but with vegan leather. So some of the project deliverables, first was a life cycle analysis, and we're looking at the GHG emissions of the cottontail bag, which is what is pictured here, versus a conventional leather bag in the same specifications. And included in that life cycle analysis are instructions for future use to update the life cycle analysis, and also to begin LCAs on other products in their line. And of course, mathematical explanations of our calculations. And then kind of jumping off of the life cycle analysis is a marketing plan that presents some of the primary and secondary research findings, and also builds upon their collateral. So example, social posts, different, you know, engaging with different influencers as part of the marketing plan, and really builds on the results of the life cycle analysis, which we aren't done with yet, but hopefully will be in favor of a GUNOS bag. So I'm going to hand it off to San to talk a little bit about our LCA status so far.
So the challenge with the life cycle assessment was making the client understand what exactly it entails. The data required for an LCA is very detailed and can sometimes be confusing to a client, as they don't fully comprehend how this nitty-gritty data is relevant. The information we were provided for almost all materials and packaging components was in a qualitative format. For example, 2 pieces of hardware, that's what they would give us, with no information on the exact composition, weight, or origin of the materials. Next slide, please. So therefore, we started off by trying to effectively communicate what we needed and meeting multiple times with the client. We focused on filling in all the qualitative information we had and started to draw out the process map. And after a few weeks, we have finally received the information yesterday so the information we need to start the quantitative part, which we're very excited about. I'll now pass it on to Eric for the marketing.
Hi guys. So I'm tackling the marketing point, and our other team member who couldn't be here tonight, Christina, was also working on this with me. She really took the lead. So I know she's not here, but her presence is here. She did a great job on it. But so one of the big deliverables we have is to incorporate the LCA findings into an infographic to use as marketing material. It's kind of like plays into each other, but obviously since we haven't been able to make much progress on the LCA, we haven't been able to do much on the infographic part. So instead we kind of focused on market research, and we've done a lot of market research to form the basis of our marketing plan. So we did a couple things. We did a couple of qualitative surveys. Christina conducted them. These were 2 not in person, but Zoom interviews. And they gave a very good sense of what a potential customer was like. And the sample size was definitely skewed. They were our peers, so they were kind of young, and they were both on the vegetarian, vegan spectrum. and that's not the only customer for the Gunas bag. But what we found was that the target market is mainly millennial, well-educated, and well-styled. And they're both interviews led us to believe that over the past couple of years, they both began to shop more as more of a conscious consumer, so understanding what they were actually purchasing. And we also found that Instagram plays a big role in their purchasing habits and just their day-to-day life, and it forms how they perceive products. Yeah, so moving on, we also performed,
sorry.
Yeah, we did a competitive analysis. We found about a bunch of similar companies, and it was a weird spectrum because not all vegan leather is the same. So we kind of made a spectrum of bio-based materials, plastic-based materials, and even some plant-based materials. And we compared it with prices, and then we did another one including traditional leather bags. And we found that Gunas kind of fell right in the middle. It was definitely a luxury item, but it wasn't going to break the bank. It was definitely still affordable. And Christina also put together this incredibly comprehensive customer survey that I believe some of you may have even seen. And we'll go into some of the findings in the next slide, but it was incredibly comprehensive and great. So I guess we'll go into that now. So what did we find? We found that essentially, sorry, I'm lost in my notes, paper notes. So the first thing we saw is there's a market to exploit here. Like, not many bag manufacturers are promoting the sustainability in their products. So we found that only 46.6% of respondents had never seen a handbag brand like market their sustainability practices, and which flows into kind of some other stuff that we found. We found nearly 30% of consumers considered sustainability in their purchasing, as well as 47% of internet users worldwide, this is not from the survey, had ditched products because of services that violated their values. And that's what we've kind of seen in the conscious consumer trajectory of purchasing habits. And it's really interesting to see that a bag like this, that's not animal cruel and is potentially, hopefully we'll see in the LCA, more sustainable, that there's a market to advertise this to. And we also saw that a couple little interesting COVID intricacies, that right now people are looking for a versatile item where they can wear this out nice, but also people aren't really dressing up that much. So they also want to be able to use it now as well. Yeah, and I think Olivia will wrap it up.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. So just some next steps and, feedback from you guys. And we've heard some of, your perspectives about the process that you've had. But, next steps, we're obviously going to use the client data to begin the LCA in earnest. We've kind of built out our process map, but now we actually have the materials information and some of the transportation information to be able to build that out. And we're also going to meet with Professor Meinerken, who is the professor for the LCA class, to make sure and kind of validate our process. And once we have those results, we'll be able to build the marketing materials and strategy for, putting together an infographic that will inform the Gunas consumer about the more sustainable issues of the bag and why it's important to think about those things outside of just, the animal rights. And then a couple, feedback or, questions for you guys is, how have you dealt with getting info from the client, and have you had to pivot expectations? And I think we sort of talked about those, but would love to give your feedback on that. So yeah, thank you guys for listening. We'd love to answer any of your questions.
That was great, guys. Thank you so much. So we have a question on the chat box. What will you do in the marketing materials if the LCA result is not favorable to Gunas?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think, all of us as sustainability professionals and probably have kind of seen the maybe issues or, you know, some kind of controversies around vegan leather. And so we're hoping that, I mean, first of all, the LCA is of the GHG emissions, which we think is like one of the one category that could outweigh conventional leather, just because cows are so carbon intensive, obviously. But we've talked to the client about that, just to kind of level set her expectations. And we're thinking about focusing on other like sustainability issues related to vegan leathers, such as water use as well, because water use is also a huge issue in you know, leather production. So we're hoping to pivot that way if it doesn't kind of go in our favor.
Okay. Another question. Yes, and okay, so does Gunas plan on making the LCA public?
That's a good question. I think that they'll make some parts of the results public in the infographic. So obviously, you know, if it's not in their favor, we'll have to discuss that, and if they want to make those results public. But through the infographic, like if we can say, you know, one bag uses X amount of GHG gases less than, you know, the leather alternative, obviously would be sharing that publicly.
Awesome, thank you. So I guess I have one question. Real quick, what's your sample size, just out of curiosity, for the survey? How many respondents did you get? And do you still need?
We got a lot, actually. We've already closed. We almost got 100, I think. Close to 100.
We got more than 100, actually.
More than 100. Thank you, Eric.
We decided that
awesome.
we had enough, then we didn't need any more.
Yeah.
But if you would like to, if anyone is dying to receive this survey, I'm sure we can provide
I
it.
just thought that it was a great opportunity to promote your survey. So
we appreciate it.
Thank
awesome.
you.
Okay, and then another question. So I guess we've talked about this a little bit, but you just recently got the information that you need for the LCA. You're going to start doing the calculations. Is there a backup plan? And I'm not saying you need one, but what if, because it took a long way, and I know there's a conflict with like the factory that's not getting like, that maybe you won't have access to the entire information that you need for the LCA. Do you guys have a plan for that?
Yeah,
strategy?
Yeah, we do. So, you know, our initial idea or goal was to create a full footprint analysis or carbon footprint analysis of one of the bags. But if we aren't able to get the data in time, or enough of the data to make it at least, you know, mostly accurate, we're planning on just comparing the GHG emissions of the actual material, like the leather material that's used. So our analysis was going to look at, if the bag was made in leather, what would that, you know, what would the emissions be? And so really only the difference would be the actual like outer fabric used, so versus PU versus leather. And so we would look directly at just those two components and see the GHG emission difference.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much, guys. Really good job.
Thank you.
Now we have our next group.
Yes, let me share my screen.
Thank you.
Okay, can everyone see it right? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so hi everyone, my name is Carla, and I've been working with Ellen, Tessa, Natalie, Julia, and Nina with Hello Cocktail, and we've been just helping them achieve a more sustainability-oriented goal. So just a quick overlook here of the agenda for today, what we'll be talking about. But moving on to the actual conversation, just talk about Hella. It is a mixology company that's really rooted in integrity and discovery. It was originally co-founded by 3 best friends in Brooklyn in 2011. So they started off being a pretty small company, and they've grown significantly, I would say, in the past 9 years or so. Their main idea is to give the consumer maximum taste with minimum effort. What does that mean? That means that they essentially give you all the tools that you need to make a mixed drink besides the alcohol. And so in that sense, their product line includes bitters and soda, premium mixers, bitters, and cocktail kits. They are sold in retail stores across the country, and as well as online and on their website. Hella is pretty socially involved currently. They have several nonprofit partnerships with organizations such as the Legal Defense and Education Fund for the NAACP, Black Lives Matter, Edible Schoolyard NYC, and the National Down Syndrome Society, among a couple of others. But the biggest thing right now is that they want to really make a shift towards more of an environmentally focused, sustainability focused mindset. And that's what we have been helping them with. In order to do that, our project goal has been to do an LCA, a life cycle analysis, similar to what the GUNAS team is doing. So what Hella wants is to understand the carbon footprint of their products, but we're solely focusing on their bitters and soda line, predominantly looking at the spritz and dry versions of the bitters and soda line. So it's a lot more focused, whereas it would be kind of crazy to do all of the bitters and soda line. So in order to do that, our deliverable has been basically to conduct a cradle to grave LCA for, like I said, the bitters and soda, spritz and dry. And that has really been looking at every single component of the product, literally from the ingredient source, where they come from, how they're shipped, how they arrive here, all of the middlemen distributors that Hella buys directly from. It's been quite a process, but we've been very, very lucky that the Hella team has been more than receptive and more than supportive, and everything has been working out pretty well so far. As well as doing the actual LCA, what they expect of us is to do a report showing their greenhouse gas emissions, because they want to get an idea of the environmental impact that their production process creates, looking mostly at the greenhouse gases. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a report once we actually narrow down our findings for the LCA that we're still working on currently. And we're going to give them some recommendations as to how they can reduce their carbon footprint, and a couple of other things regarding sustainability that they have expressed an interest in throughout our meetings with them. They also want a little synthesized 1-page document that's basically a summary of the report that can be easily digestible, mostly for investors and clients. And based on that, they also want us to give them an outline of just information within the 1-pager, just like rewritten even shorter, in a way that they can use for their marketing, predominantly for Instagram posts and stories. So looking at our methodology, like I said, we've been really lucky with our client. We've been in very, very close communication with them, emailing Ellie multiple times a week, just asking questions about details of their suppliers, their movement, the energy usage of their plant, like everything. And as well as having meetings with both Ellie and Tobin. Tobin is one of the 3 original co-founders, once a month. So we actually just had our monthly meeting with them last week. Everything seems to be going pretty well. They're pretty happy with how everything looks. And just like a quick rundown of what the actual LCA process is. We've done the data collection part of it is done. The research and outline of the process map is mostly done. We just need a couple of, mostly on the end of life side of things. We've obviously defined the parameters or boundaries. That's how we've started working on everything. And currently, I would say that we are at the 4th step, completing the LCA inventory by life stage. If you guys have any questions regarding the more technical side of that, that would be with Ellen and Tessa, because we've had to split our team into 2, taking into account the fact that most people in our team haven't taken the class with Christoph. So they have really taken over the whole actual meticulous calculation aspect of it. So I really, hats off to them. They're doing a great job. I have no idea how that's working. But moving on from that, they'll determine the carbon emissions factors, perform final calculations, and then analyze the data in order to have a report done. There have been some changes in our project scope, and it was mostly the fact that it was assumed that we were going to do a comparative analysis between Hella and another competitor. That is no longer happening. And instead, what we are doing is mostly focusing on recommendations for them to become more sustainable. This is an overview of the process map so far. If you look from left to right, you see all the ingredients and how they've moved from their points of origin, the ports, going through the middlemen suppliers, where you see the little cans is kind of where the actual Hella production process is happening, of turning the drink, turning all those components into an actual drink and canning it, and finally shipping it out to warehouses to be taken to several different distribution centers. And like I said, we still are missing a couple of components more towards the end of life portion of things. Having said all of that, what are our next steps? Our next steps are finalizing the LCA inventory, which is what I touched on previously, as well as analyzing the results and determining recommendations given to them. Writing the recommendations, really, like I said, they want us to kind of tell them what their carbon footprint is, as well as what they can do to become carbon negative or carbon neutral. And once we actually have those numbers calculated, then we can really move forward and tell them exactly what they could do, whether it's like plant more trees or look at green energy or what have you. And they also expressed interest on us giving them some plastic alternatives for their product transportation, because they don't really like the fact that they have to wrap the cans in a lot of shrink wrap as it's moving from point A to point B, only to be taken out of the shrink wrap and then rewrapped essentially. And like I said, the comprehensive report and the 1-pager, it's basically the same information, but just even shorter, short and sweet, easily digestible. And lastly, the marketing materials. So essentially what Ellie described the marketing material outline to me was that they just want us to take essentially the 1-pager, put it into short squares of text, and in a way that's more fun and more consumable, and that, like I said, they can put into their actual Instagram. They don't expect us to actually come up with the eye-catching marketing material. They just want us to give them the summarized information in a way that they can just give to their marketing team, and the marketing team can make it pretty and vibrant, and they can then use for what they're doing. So that's really what we've been doing. I've been really happy with how everything's going. And I know the rest of the team has. Obviously, we're all working pretty hard, but I feel like we're doing good, you know? So with that being said, thank you, cheers. And if you guys have any questions or comments, I'm more than open.
That was awesome, Carla. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay, we have one. So why did the project scope shift from comparative analysis to recommendations?
Yeah, so the first meeting that we had with Ellen and Tobin, I asked them about the comparative analysis that they wanted to have, and they immediately were the ones that said, we actually don't have a competitor in mind for you, because that was my question. Who do you want us to compare you to? And so they said, we don't really have anyone in mind, and it's actually kind of complicated because the scale of our product and the fact that even if there's some comparable competitors, they still don't make the exact same product that we do, or like they technically do, but it's in a glass bottle instead of a can. So there were just a couple of variables there, and Hella themselves just took it out and they said, honestly, just scrap that. What we want to do is focused on recommendations.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Would you potentially give a recommendation to change suppliers, maybe if it is shipped far?
So I think the biggest issue here is the fact that they have a lot of different suppliers for a lot of different products, really. The only factor that we have found is interesting in regards to that is the fact that the ingredients that come from the furthest, like that take the longest to get shipped to their New Jersey facility, are like a very, very small amount of the final product. Like I think it's less than 1%. And it's like a lot of different ingredients. So if we find that 1% of ingredients makes a huge difference in regards to their carbon footprint, then I can see us having that recommendation. But it is also not that likely that that is to happen just because of how tiny of a percentage those ingredients are.
Thank you. I have a question. So you mentioned that the client kind of like just dropped in a meeting that they wanted you to look at plastic or alternatives to ship the cans. Is that something that you discussed in advance? I don't think that was within the scope of the project.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. It was really mentioned, and it's something that we've kind of added to the list, but I know it's not like a priority for us right now, you know, and I don't feel like it's a main priority for them either. It was more like we were discussing packaging because they were putting me in contact with the people that are in charge of like their boxing and the actual can itself and the can label, different components of the packaging material. And Tobin mentioned, oh, you know, something that I really personally don't like about this whole process is the fact that we use so much plastic. So if you guys knew of anything off the top of your heads, if you could think of anything to suggest, I would really appreciate that. But it didn't really feel like a very hard, like you need to do this. This is our main focus now, you know, just kind of like an add-on.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions?
Okay. All right, thank you guys.
Very good. Thank you so much. So
next up, ING.
Holly, do you have the slides, or can somebody pass the screen over to me?
Yes, we can do that. Do you have access yet, Andrew?
I don't see it.
There should be a button at the bottom, Andrew, that says share screen.
Got it.
Yeah, I think you've got the, I was confused. I was like, I don't know how else. Okay, cool.
Holly, it's not working. Can you just pop our presentation up?
Sure, let me pull it. Just one second. And almost there. Midterms. Excellent. Let me just open it. Okay, 1 second. And all right. Can you guys see it? Let me get it in
There we go.
presentation mode though.
Holly, it's on the top right next to the yellow share button.
Present. Thank you. It was hiding under my Zoom. Okay.
Great, thanks, Holly. So this is Andrew Maris. I'm representing the ING team. I hope that on the line we have Anna, Alyssa, Liz, Grace, and Rahul, who have all been contributing and continue to pull quite a bit of weight. The challenge here for those of you who I hope most everybody knows ING. ING is one of the world's largest banks, based out of Amsterdam, but they have a global footprint. And the challenge was to build an enhanced due diligence framework for covering biodiversity loss and deforestation. And so, Holly, if you go to the next page, ING, as what we found that European banks are considerably ahead of domestic US banks in their commitment to sustainability. ING has an annual disclosure called the Terra Report. The first year they did it was 2019. It was about 60 or 70 pages, and it covered about 5 different industry segments. When they did it in 2020, they had gone from 5 industry segments up to 10. And they covered sort of the ones, the key industry segments that you would expect: energy and technology and shipping. And the idea was to manage or to help their clients manage their CO2 emissions using fairly well-regarded, well-known industry methodologies and commitments. So they benchmark to the Paris Accord, they benchmark to the Poseidon Principles. And so then and the goal, what they say, the last line here, I'll call this out, is they believe that their commitment will ultimately help the financial sector make a bigger impact. So banks are typically not generators of CO2, but they have the risk of banking and financing other companies that do actually have significant CO2 risk. And so the challenge that this project was meant to take on was to first and foremost build this due diligence framework to assess biodiversity risk, including deforestation, in the agriculture portfolio. This seemed like a fairly straightforward and easy challenge. And then, as we talked to the client, then there was a follow-up and said, and if you guys have time after that, if you could identify other segments in the banking book where biodiversity might be a risk and where we might need to have a similar enhanced due diligence framework. And the idea is that when a new deal comes in or a new customer comes in, there's a whole range of analysis that's done. The credit risk, there's know your customer to make sure that they're not engaged in illegal activities. And then you also will do, financial analysis to check the quality of the customer. And then on top of that, they wanted to then add a layer that would check for biodiversity risk. Fairly straightforward and fairly simple until we started to peel the onion. So Holly, if you go to the next slide. So the agriculture book is only about $4 billion. right, out of 800 and some billion dollars. And that seemed to us, as we talked to the client, the question was, well, if you can't solve this problem, would you consider just exiting the book? Because it's not a hugely material piece of your activity. And so if you actually just got out of it, it really wouldn't seem to be too bad. And the answer is we really would prefer not to get out of it. But what we have found is that there is this idea of agriculture as an industry really doesn't exist. Agriculture is a catch-all, and when you take a look on the right side in terms of all the sectors, the subsectors within agriculture that this breaks out, there's farming, which we pretty much had expected, and then there's livestock, and that could be cattle, it could be pigs, it could be anything, and then separately you would then look at the biodiversity risk of dairy farms. And then at the very bottom, you've got a series of other activities that they do that are related to support for different kinds of activities within agriculture. On top of that, though, the project scope then also includes commodities financing. So if I buy soybeans from Holly, and Holly has sourced the soybeans in a way that has created a biodiversity risk, I need to be responsible, and I need to figure out a way to work through the supply chain on a very large commodities financing activity to figure out that that's not running afoul of this enhanced due diligence. So Holly, if you go to the next slide. And then on top of that, so what you see in the orange, that's the footprint of ING's wholesale banking book. And the two key areas that the client really would like us to look at, one is Brazil and one is Indonesia. Well, the biodiversity risk that you get in Brazil has been explained to me as this gets into, very minute insects that then impact the soil quality, that then, and it enhances the overall ability of the soil to support biodiversity. Whereas in Indonesia, you're dealing with palm oil and deforestation, which then impacts the biodiversity there. So Holly, if you go to the next page. So we actually, we've had a series of conversations with people in banks, someone from the UN, and then I also found somebody, a professor by the name of Bruce Kahn, who actually teaches within the sustainability program, and he teaches sustainability, agriculture sustainability. And he pointed me to a report done by the World Wildlife Federation. And what you see here, and I apologize for the fine print, but this actually really captures the challenge of what exactly is biodiversity. And on the left, you have the categories of impact, which go from climate change, air quality, soil erosion, water use, pesticides, disease and animal care, labor, local and indigenous communities. And these all differ. They give you differing environmental risks, and those in turn are tied to different commodities. And then depending on the commodity, you can then get into key performance criteria. Now, I know that Anna and Alyssa on our team, we've had to actually take a step back to come up with what we believe a good definition of biodiversity risk is. Because as you see, it differs by activity. Even within activity, if I just go into farming, it differs by the product, and then it differs by region. And so we end up looking at a very, very large matrix. And so I see I got a 2-minute warning here, it's sort of like the Oscar speech. So Holly, if you go on to the next slide. So we've had to go back, right? And we're very, very fortunate because the client is a wonderful client. He's very patient, and he realizes that, we do have day jobs that we're struggling to complete as well. But so now we've gone back to defining biodiversity. And then once you do that, and that's, where Anna and Alyssa have been spending a considerable amount of time, is to come up with our definition that we will then take back to the client. Once we can do that, then the rest starts to flow. We can identify what the metrics would be, classify what's a high, medium, or low impact. And then, the focus that Grace has been bringing to the team is that once you do come up with a matrix or a metric, that's fine. You can put together a 2-pager, but you have to come up with a user guide. The credit analyst, the risk analyst has to understand how to use the due diligence process. And then we've got to build in a little bit of time to test run this thing, hopefully within somebody in the sustainability program before we take it out to the client and to the risk analyst. And so, Holly, if you just go to the last slide. And then, concurrently, the client also wanted us to look at what would be best practice. And so I've been out talking to some of the domestic banks, the international banks, and of course, BlackRock has come out and they've put out a major statement about sustainable finance, which of course has opened them up to criticism as to whether they are actually being sustainably minded or whether they're just trying to generate higher fees. And so there's time. So I'll stop there.
Awesome. Thanks for catching that, Andrew. Very interesting stuff. I really liked even though it was a small print, I like the diagram you showed because the biodiversity really is in and of itself a huge scope to tackle. Just that alone, not including everything else. But did anyone have any questions? All right, we have a question. Are there examples of similar processes or metrics from other organizations that you have used to guide you?
No. The challenge is that the banks, the global banks, the ones that are systemically important, have been so beaten up by other regulatory requirements, and what ING has achieved within their ESG framework is close to best practice. To go to the next step, you're getting and you spend so much time getting to that disclosure, and this is only year 2 of that disclosure, to then focus on something that's such a small segment of your book. Eventually you may get there, but it's just not a priority. The World Wildlife Fund report did call out the banks and said that they were really lagging in practice and in commitment, and I think that's probably pretty true.
Okay. Kind of along the same lines of that question, another question came in, and it was, have you been able to connect with other banks that manage agricultural books? And I know that ING's percentage in their portfolio of agriculture is small, but are there other banks that have like larger agricultural portfolios?
So I did speak to an old colleague who is in portfolio management for Silicon Valley Bank, and they have a very large book lending into vineyards. And the interesting thing there is that given all the wildfires and everything that's been going on out in California, they're still not very advanced in this area of sustainability risk, climate change. And the only reason why they have started to move along is first because they have 2 major shareholders. One is BlackRock and one is CalPERS, who are both making larger commitments into the area of sustainability. And then they also, they have a subsidiary in the UK that comes under the European regulation, which is much stricter in this area. So they're getting a lot of pressure from those areas, but it's not coming from internal.
Interesting.
Just to add to that, I used to work at a bank in commercial underwriting that had a large agricultural portfolio, and I still keep in touch with those people. So if you guys would want me to connect you, if not, no big deal, but I thought I'd put it out.
No, that'd be very helpful, Olivia. I'll catch up offline.
Sounds good.
All right, we had one more question. It was, you mentioned that you wanted to kind of test run this process before you show the client. How would you guys go about doing that?
So Professor Khan, who he's a part-time professor in sustainable agriculture in the SUMA program, he also works on a fund outside of the university, and he's offered to look at anything that we do and to give us some feedback. And he knows quite a bit about banking in the agriculture segment. You know, he asked me questions like, you know, are the loans collateralized? You know, because the thing is that if you're going to bank a farmer in Brazil and you're collateralized by his real estate, you really want to make sure that he's doing a good job of maintaining his soil health. Otherwise, you're going to end up taking the collateral at the end, and it's going to be worthless.
Makes sense.
So, yeah, you know, it's just there. But you know, as I say, this project looked, you know, very nice and manageable and meek, and it's sort of like the ocean. You turn your back on it, and next thing you know, it crushes you.
Well, thank you for the presentation. You guys did a great job. It is a dense topic, and I like what you've done so far, and looking forward to seeing the next phase. So thank you, and I think we will head to the next team, WeAct.
Oh, hi. I don't think I can't share my screen. It says when someone else already is.
Hey, Taylor, try again. I just redid the settings.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah,
okay.
And I just stopped sharing, so you should be good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can everyone see it? Okay, awesome. Hi, thank you everyone for such amazing presentations so far. It's been so enlightening and really cool to hear about what all the other teams are doing. So hello, we're WeAct. My name is Taylor. I'm our project manager, and my team is myself, Alan, Kat, Drew, Yoni, and Michael. And I just want to say I'm so proud of all of you for all of the hard work you've been doing so far. So I'm going to take us into, oh, how do I change slides? Okay, got it. Sorry. What exactly are just the steps in our presentation and just a little bit of general overview about WeAct itself. So in the first section of our presentation, we're going to talk about the work scope and general info. The second is our project approach. Third of all, like what we've done so far, summary of our research, and four, as to where we're going next. So first of all, our project overview, what is WeAct and what is the general goal of our project? So here pictured is a group of WeAct students that were in one of the program and volunteers. So WeAct itself is an environmental justice nonprofit based out of New York City. They've done a lot of really great work locally to make sure that environmental justice issues are in the forefront of the community. They want to make sure that low-income communities as well as racial minorities understand the consequences of what's going on legislatively in the New York area and also in the United States in general, very pertinent at this time. But just by making sure that people in the area are well educated on topics, especially pertaining to environmental justice. So within WeAct itself, there are many different programs, but we're specifically working on one that deals with educational modules to teach environmental justice. And our project deals with one person in particular in WeAct. Her name is Taylor. My name is also Taylor, so it gets a little bit confusing, but in the presentation, we're referring to the other Taylor. Okay.
So Taylor was referencing the one program that we're mainly consulting on, and that program is called the Environmental Health and Justice Leadership Training Program. This is a recent cohort of graduates from that program, and the program is offered at both youth and adult levels. At the youth level, they typically do it in one school right now, the Wheels Academy, which is in Washington Heights. And at the adult level, it's a little bit more broad in scope, but they're always offering it to the WeAct community members through their paid membership. So that could be anyone that lives in the area or people that they've marketed to in the past. Go to the next slide. The current We Act educational model offers 22 distinct modules. They emphasize environmental justice, community activism, community empowerment, nutrition, and just kind of like general health, both from a personal and a community level perspective. The 22 modules, we'll talk a little bit more about this in the presentation later, but we are actively working with them to make it a little bit more palatable and sell them in a more palatable form. As I said before, it's taught to both youth and adults as well as community members. The pricing, which we'll discuss, is variable and it depends highly on the client that they're working with. So sometimes it's offered free, sometimes people are paying for it. And we're trying to work with them to standardize that. And as I said, it's currently taught in Washington Heights at the Wheels Academy.
So we currently are using a 3-phase process. To kick off, we met with a client to gauge the scope of the project and figure out what was most important to them. Phase 1 was to research initial plans and ideas. After we did that, we gathered our ideas and broke out into 3 different teams to complete our specific research. And our teams were the structure, pricing, and marketing teams. Right now, we're currently in phase 3, where we consider the marketing and the broader scope of the project. And when we finish, we're going to meet with Taylor, the client, once again to make sure that they approve of the final project. Next, we're going to talk about our approach. And we're trying to focus on finding new clients and securing partnerships. A lot of these nonprofit organizations rely on grants and donations. So we're trying to help our client figure out how to gain more of that. We want to do some continuity planning because one of the client's pain points is if someone wants to leave the organization, they often leave with the projects and they don't really continue to grow afterwards. We also want to look at staff modeling and the possibility of maybe hiring freelancers or getting volunteers or interns to kind of take off some of the mundane tasks from our clients' plate because they're really busy and overwhelmed at this current moment. We also want to focus on increasing community engagement, and one of the ways we want to do that is having the alumni teach current classes and to connect with the students. We also want to hone into a marketing message that we can use for fundraising and marketing purposes.
You can go to the next slide. So for the overall structure, as Alan mentioned, we kind of want to, this is for We Act as a whole, and not only for the specific program, is maybe kind of approach it more of like a startup or a small tech company. Where hiring freelancers, especially for sales and assistant management roles, would help them a lot, kind of like free up the full-time staff's time. And what Michael mentioned, so basically the idea would be to kind of create, instead of a 22 module a la carte where the client kind of gets confused and maybe about the different modules and what's being taught. So we decided to go with kind of like a bundle that would be topic specific. And these would be designed for the different types of students that would take the bundles. So we have students K through 12 in school workshops or after school programs, young professionals, educational professionals, and community champions. And the idea would be that we could match kind of like, it's not one bundle is only for students. It would be, let's say, a bundle could be also for young professionals and educational professionals, and kind of like mix and match what works for which type of student. And what Alan mentioned, the training for trainers. So the idea of that once, the Taylor leaves, this thing doesn't just crash and crumble after that, which kind of happens, I guess, at We Act oftenly. And so it's kind of like an idea of how we can feed back into the system and maybe have like even a ranking or kind of a badge system similar to the Scouts. And finally, in order to keep the community going and establish a strong set of networks, galas, mixers, events for the alumni in the community. And that way we really can free up all the time for the staff and also create, outreach for the program.
And so moving on to the pricing for the program, this has been one of the main points that Taylor's asked us to look at. As is mentioned, she wants to get away from kind of relying on grants or kind of almost guesswork to set a price for an EHJLT program and into a more standard model that can be easily marketed. Currently, the pricing for the program, it varies for a full training session $4,000 to $5,000, but depends on the number of modules that's being taught, the actual affordability of the program for the client that's asking for it, and any specifics or changes that the client is going to need for programming for that given session. So that's the main reason that we've decided to categorize the 22 separate modules into specific bundles, because it'll help to set a more stable proposed pricing. So that's where we get to our proposed pricing model. It's based off a set price of $3,500 plus a graded rate, depending on the number of participants that are going to take place in a training session. We actually had the opportunity to sit through one of the WEAC trainings for 2 of the modules, and they're really informative and really well put together. So we think having a more marketable model for these bundles is really going to be beneficial for both WEAC and the community if they can broaden the reach of the programming.
So there are 3 distinct products that WEAC is trying to sell: the environmental health and justice leadership training for youth and adults, and the online learning mini modules that was launched during the pandemic. So we want to target young adults in college or recent graduates looking to elevate their leadership and environmental justice skills and experience. We also want to find more high schools to partner with, and we're also looking for companies who are looking for sustainability and equity trainings. So far in our research, we're reaching out and interviewing those who have worked with WEAC to get their feedback, and we are speaking with someone at the Department of Education to look into potential partnerships or roadblocks in working with public schools. Our marketing strategy so far, we found out from them that they have $20,000 currently allocated for marketing their program. Our suggestions are guerrilla marketing, where we allocate about $100 per month for supplies. We can recruit volunteers for this effort in posting random stickers around the city and support for events held to publicize the program. We also suggest allocating conservatively $500 a month for paid social to target parents, school administrators, and young professionals to raise awareness of the program. We recommend using budget for freelance sales and business development to help execute sales of the program to schools. Since Taylor is really busy and does not have time to sell the program, this would be a huge help in getting it in more schools. And we've also created a branding narrative of WEAC as a longstanding institution in Harlem that is fighting for big change with small resources.
You guys are at time. Thank you so much. That was excellent. We have one question that came through, and I think we might have one more. It looks like they wanted to know, are you worried about the EHJLT programming occurring less often if the proposed pricing model is more expensive?
That's definitely a great question. And Alan and I have been working on the pricing. So Alan, feel free to jump in if you have anything else to say. But initially when we were talking, we actually were thinking a much lower kind of set baseline price for the training. And then in conversing with Taylor, she made it clear that she's currently been marketing the program kind of a couple thousands of dollars higher than we were thinking. And we're planning to kind of talk to her about what the kind of good price will be for the program. But I guess initially we're not wanting to kind of undercut too far from what she was expecting the program to be offered for. So like, yes, that is a concern for a short answer.
No, that makes sense. One of the other questions was, yeah, how did you guys arrive at the $3,500? But that makes sense given the client kind of gave you a range of where she's been marketing. And I mean, just a statement from my end, it would seem that your different market audiences might have different pricings, and then those can even sparse out from there. If you're looking at pricing for schools, you've got the schools in the low-end communities versus, private schools that can probably afford to pay much more. So that will be interesting to see how you guys do a slide scale or develop that out for pricing.
Exactly, and that also kind of where like a sales freelance could come in and kind of help with that end.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did anyone else have any questions? All right. I think we are good. WeAct, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. And I will turn the time back to Nicole.
Yeah, guys, honestly, fantastic job to everyone. I'm very, very thoroughly impressed, and I'm sure the rest of the board is too. So clap for everybody. It really does show me that we are taking our skills and knowledge and our interests that we have built in the SUMA program thus far and actually applying it, you know, with real clients in the real world in the real time. I hope this is an invaluable experience to you, because certainly it's a platform that we can actually practice what we had set out and, you know, put out to do. Just wanted to discuss some next steps for each individual teams. You guys know what you have to do. Go guns a-blazing. We trust you guys. If you need help, I'm like a broken tape recorder. We are here to help you through and through. You have our emails. You have your fantastic DOPs. Hit them up whenever you need help. In terms of workshops, for the marketing teams, there are workshops being planned for the month of November, so look out for that. For the other teams, if you guys do need additional help in terms of talking to experts, more faculty, if it's faculty, feel free to reach out by yourselves. Just keep the DOPs notified. If it's industry experts, do let us know. We have a long list of connections. Tell us what you need. We'll do it for you. Just wanted to plug some November events. We have our panel next week. It's called Consulting for Planet and People. We're super excited for it. With all that's been going on, we really want to highlight how consultants can better marginalize and BIPOC communities. I think there's a stigma that, you know, you go into consulting, you go into the big four, you make a ton of money, and, you know, you call it a day, when really consultants can make a huge impact in the world. So stay tuned for that event. We also want to emphasize that Net Impact is a humongous organization, and this is an academic chapter, and there's definitely professional chapters. So if you do want to continue, we're having a mingle event with the awesome consultants from the professional chapter. They come from all walks of life, finance, education, like all the stuff that we're doing and way, way more. So we're going to have a little mingle with them and see what they've been up to, because they're in their little semester as well. So it's good to kind of combine brains to see what's going on with the world. Besides that, you guys go guns a-blazing. Again, tell us if you need help, and we'll see you at the final. Have a good day, guys.
Thank you.
Good job,
everyone. Thank you.
Good job, everybody.